you want to start right at the beginning then, really?
Yeah. So can you just tell me your name and your relationship to Derek when you first met him, when you first started working there?
Well, my name's Graham Essenhigh. I think I was the last apprentice that came out of the studio, which had quite an illustrious sort of history behind it and loads that went before me, and pretty much everyone came through the studio, moved on and went into press and media going forward. So I can't really remember when I first went into Derek's. I think it was about 87, and Derek told a different story to the one I recall, in that I remember Derek had either lost an assistant or somebody had moved on, and I got wind of this and heard about it. I'd just finished a diploma in photography at the time, and I turned up fresh-faced with a portfolio, and Derek tells a story that I basically told him that I was going to be given a job by him. And I think it's quite a key thing, that, because I never saw Derek as a technical person. It was never about f-stops and focus and anything technical. It was more about people. And I think that's what Derek perhaps saw in me. It was a people skill that you either had or you didn't. And that was what he really sort of drove into us. It was about understanding people, knowing how people thought. And that led into getting the best picture, or the best position for you to be in to get the best picture. So it was never a sort of techie, geeky thing with Derek. It was more about people and understanding them. And yeah, Derek told the story that I basically turned up and told him I was going to give him the job, and lo and behold, he did. He gave me a job and gave me a chance. And I owe Derek so much for that, in that I think we had one of the best starts in our careers ever, which led to me going on into ITV in the regions, ITN nationally and internationally, and now just filming all sorts for corporates and for events and all sorts of things. So it was a great start, but it was about understanding those people.
So can you remember what your first assignment was that he gave you?
My first assignment, gosh, Ruth, I genuinely can't. I don't remember, to be honest. It would have probably been one of the sort of hardy annual jobs that we sort of kept going back to. There were a lot of things that were diaried that we would visit time after time. Various shows or events in the community, or Mayfair was another classic one. And those stories would get put in the diary and would turn into something. It might be a court case. So again, there were court lists that every week they came out. So you knew where that story would be, and you'd go and follow that story, and off you went. So trying to remember any one like that, I genuinely can't. There were so many merged in. But it was interesting. I mean, the courts is a great one. I remember my first time going to court with Derek, and pretty sure it was Worcester actually. And we turned up outside, and he sort of said, "There you go, lad, go and get some donuts." And I was really confused. What do I need donuts for? You know, go and get half a dozen donuts. And basically, he'd worked this out, and it, again, come back to the people thing. You got half a dozen donuts. You walked across the road. You went to the custodian at the Shire Hall in Worcester, and you sat down and said, "You got a cup of tea to go with these donuts?" And you'd befriend them, and you'd talk to them, you'd give them some donuts, and before you knew it, they'd be sort of, you'd then slip in, "Where am I going to park?" And they'd let you park in the court precinct. And that was the deal. You sort of paid a few donuts, and in you went. And it was understanding people and getting the most out of people that sort of taught you. And it's fabulous for that, you know. So I paid my car parking with donuts most of my career.
So tell us about the first time you went to the court then.
So let's go back to the court. So yeah, I remember my first trip to a court, and I remember pulling up outside, and Derek sort of said, "Go and get some donuts, half a dozen donuts." And I was sort of puzzled as to, why do I need donuts? You know, I'm going to film a court case. And it was a trick that stood me well across the years, that you basically bought a load of donuts, and you go across to the court and sort of blag your way into, "Is there a cup of tea to go with these donuts?" And you'd talk to the custodian, and you get chatting with them, and then you'd slip into conversation. "I don't know where to park, where can I park?" And 9 times out of 10, they'd let you park in the court precincts, and away you went. So, and it was that I think I learned more from Derek. Here, all those little tips about just talking to people. And inevitably, you get another story. So that was another sort of unwritten rule in the office, that you always went back to the office with the next story to put in the diary. And you became a photojournalist, you know, just by talking to people, understanding people, and coming back with the next story, and that led to the next one and the next one. But there were so many that became hardy annuals. I mean, as I look back through, they'd kind of died off a lot by the time I got to Derek. But look at things like the hop picking, the apple harvest, and then the various sort of events that came to with that. So they were fabulous things. They were fabulous days as well. But it was all about being a people person. It wasn't about the technicalities of the sort of photography, and it was pre-presumed that you knew how to do that. You knew how to use the camera, whether that was stills or film, but it was about getting the most out of people. And that was, I think, what I learned out of Derek more than anything. And taking that forward, you know, I'm really proud of the fact that we've never dumped on anybody. You know, we've always got the best out of people just by being polite, being friendly, and realising that it's a massive thing for a lot of people in a story. That half-hour or 2-hour window that you're with them is a big thing for them. You might do 4 or 5 of those in a day, but to them, they'll never forget it. And even to this day, I can walk down streets right across the Midlands and people will bump into you and sort of, hello, how are you? And you're looking at them thinking, I haven't got a clue who you are, but I've done a story with you. What was the story? And you're trying to remember what the story is. And then they'll often prompt you as to what the story is, and then it all drops back into place. You remember who they were and what the story was, and away you go. So yeah, you make a big impact on people, covering their lives really, and filming their lives.
So how did Derek adapt to different changing technologies and video and all of those kind of things and film?
As an organisation, we adapted very well. I mean, we were incredibly busy and incredibly on top of things evolving. You know, as I look back, Derek starting on single plate shots, then being some of the early ones on 2¼ and 35mm, and then with the video, we moved from film into video, into U-matic, and then B2SP and onwards. So we were very much at the forefront of that and delivering it, but it was never an obsession to be sort of geeky with numbers and facts and figures. It was just a tool, you know, and you learnt to use the new tool and off you went again. But the core skill was always about getting the most out of the subject, really. And it almost didn't matter whether you were using a box brownie or today an iPhone. That is just a piece of equipment that enables you to capture that image or that story. And that was where the priority was. So yeah, we all sort of learnt and kept up to date with things, but it wasn't the obsession, wasn't with the kit, it was with the people and with the stories. So that was very much the way it sort of moved forward. So, but yeah, it was interesting times, moving from still images for myself into video. I mean, there's very much a difference in the approach. With a still image, you've got one frame to tell a story. With a moving image, you've got 1 minute, 2 minutes, you know, it goes on. So it's about building that story in a series of images rather than just that one frame. So I found the film side much more, to me, to my genre, than the stills, but you know, each to his own.
So how did that come about that you did did they think, oh, you were the bright young thing,
Oh, I don't know.
he's the new boy, give him the video camera?
No, I think I arrived at an opportune moment. I mean, all the way through my life, from the age of sort of 6 or 7, I wanted to be a filmmaker. That was my obsession. I wanted to be a filmmaker. I think it goes back to watching things like Blue Peter as a kid and watching those sort of expeditions they went on and thinking, oh, I want to be the guy that films that. So that was always at the back of my mind, and I sort of landed at Derek's just at the right time when news in particular was moving from film across to video. It was the new era, and Derek at that time was sort of coming further towards the end of his career, so it was just an optimum time to go in there. So I never shot anything on film. I loaded film mags for Derek as a camera assistant, but I never shot anything on film. And I think within about 6 or 8 months of going there, we'd invested in video, and we had our first U-matic video camera, which was a huge thing. I mean, you had a shoulder-mounted camera and a big sort of VCR box that you had to carry as well. And So it was cumbersome kit. So that then evolved into one-man crewing over a period of 5 or 6 years, and deregulation of unions and all sorts of things changed, and the whole industry changed and evolved. And I was there right at the beginning of it. So this sort of fresh-faced 18-year-old, and off it went. So, and that was it. But yeah, I've seen some changes coming through.
I just wondered, was the studio in a way a bit representative of Herefordshire in a way? You know, did it?
Or was it a bit of a?
Or was it a bit of an anomaly, really?
Okay, yeah, no, okay. I think I know where we can go with that. I've got to start with that. Okay. Yeah, I think one of the key things as I looked back, I mean, in my personal view with it, I think I would honestly have said that Derek back in the late 50s, early 60s was probably one of the top half dozen freelance news photographers in the country, without any shadow of a doubt. And I think we had quite a unique position in that, because we were the sort of out far west and away from London, it wasn't just about taking pictures, it was about finding the stories as well. And I think that was sort of inherently sort of drummed into us, that you worked on one story, you took your pictures and you came back with another story that went in the diary. And we were also finding stories for national news. And I think going back, if you look at Derek's history, that was what he was good at. So you look at some of these pictures that today, they're unique. There aren't many counties that will have this social historic record of what happened in that county. You know, you look at things like the hop picking, the May Day and the cider orchards, and then all the fringe sort of festivals and events that came off of those. There have been very few counties that have that record and have that story that went into the national press. And I think that was sort of there with Derek. It was quite an entrepreneurial thing, but it was also part of life to us. You know, you sort of went in, found a story, passed it on, sold it to the newsroom, sort of thing. So that was drummed into us from the start. So without Derek, would Hereford have had the recognition it has gained slowly over the years? I don't know. It's an interesting one, but I think very much so many of those events hit the headlines because of Derek and because of the studio.
Can you just tell us about who else was there at the time? Can you sort of mention a few names of people, and then maybe talk about the...
Well, I mean, I was sort of, hang on, I'm just trying to remember names, just keep rolling. Senior moment.
Mike Charity, Rick Calder.
Rick Calder, that's who I was trying to remember. I mean, I was kind of the last of the era, but there were lots of people that had gone before me. I mean, the biggest influence, I think, outside of the studio to me was Mike Charity. And Mike was, I think, the second apprentice that went through. And Mike had a massive impact. I worked closely with Mike when he was over in Cheltenham, and I was at ITV on local news there. And I think so many people had come through that Derek Evans school of hard knocks. And one of the ones I remember with Mike, we were working alongside one another on Laurie Lee's funeral. And Mike was doing stills for the Nationals. I was there doing video for news, for Central News. And I remember Mike just disappearing. I thought, where the heck's he gone? You know, he hasn't got the shot yet. The coffin hasn't come. The funeral cortege hasn't come. Where's he gone? He disappeared. And that was it. We never saw Mike for the rest of the day. And the Nationals the next day, all the broadsheets had used Mike's picture. And again, it goes back to the sort of way we were taught by Derek, was look for something different. There's always a different shot. And Mike had gone the other side of the valley. He'd disappeared over the other side of the valley because he'd spotted that there must have been 50 to 100 press guys there. And the picture that Mike got was all of the press there with the church in the background, funeral cortege turning up and all the press filming it. And that was Mike's shot. It made all the broadsheets. And I think that was one of the things that Derek sort of instilled in us, was looking for that extraordinary picture or that slightly unusual picture. You know, don't just go for the normal. It's often something different that makes people sit up and look at it. So it was interesting looking at that. But yeah, there were a lot of people came through there. There was Rick Calder that went to the BBC. Graham Essenhigh went on to be Western Daily Press stills photographer. Myself going on to ITV as well. And yeah, there were a lot of us came through Derek's studio, and I think all had the same sort of beliefs and sort of background and training from what we learnt there.
Yeah, so tell us about the few kind of things that you return to every year.
I think that was the thing. I mean, they're probably in the records, the old work diaries now. If there were certain things at the beginning in January, you'd sit through the diary and you'd sort of slot them in and put them in ready. And there were so many like that. Things like the Mayfair or the hop harvest or the apple harvest, because there were always stories come off the back of it. And the ones I remember are things like Boxing Day. You nearly always started Boxing Day with a murder, and then you'd go on and do the Christmas baby. And away you went. And I mean, I think I'd probably left Derek by then, but I don't remember the first sort of 15 years of my career. I always worked Boxing Day, and it was nearly always the same. It was either a fatality or a murder, and then the Christmas Day baby. And there were so many things that just got diaried like that we'd always done. And you sort of knew that when they would happen, it's like the floods. There would always be a flood in the end of January, beginning of February. You knew exactly where to go and film it. Almost like the first snowfall, you had your regular places you'd go and do that. And they were just all diaried. You know, you knew where they were going to happen and who the people were. And I think that was an interesting one. As I left staff at ITV, somebody actually said, "Can we have your contacts book?" I know it's a bit cheeky. And I said, "Yeah, not a problem. You can have my contacts book." And they were like, "Oh, really? Oh, that's really kind of you." And I said, "But it's a waste of time for you, really, isn't it?" And this person just didn't get it. And I said, "It's not contacts to you. It's just a list of phone numbers. Because whenever you ring it, you're going to have to start it with Graham S. said, or I know Graham." You know, I said, "It's just a list of phone numbers." And I think that, again, going back to Derek, it was the personal thing. You built up contacts. They knew you. They knew you personally. They knew it would be you turning up to do that story. And they were hardy annuals. You'd go back time and time again. And so you became known as the sort of news outlet in the county, which was obviously a really good thing for the studio and for us as individuals.
So tell us about why you decided to kind of move on. What kind of prompted you to?
I don't know, to be quite honest.
What did it?
I think the time was right. I'd been there for, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, I think. And then I moved on to ITV as a news cameraman there. Again, just freelancing to begin with, but then ended up on a contract, on a rolling contract with them for 20 odd years. So yeah, it was just the right time, just time to move on. I think things had evolved, kit had evolved, work had evolved, so it was just time to go, really. So, and I think like all of them before me, I think everyone, there's a long list from the 50s to the 80s and 90s when I left, that, you know, everyone had been there for half a dozen years and off you went. So Derek had a massive influence on probably a couple of dozen people across the years, you know, and sending them out into the news game. So yeah, without us all and without Derek, news in this area probably wouldn't have been the same.
So what's your kind of abiding memory of him? If you kind of imagine him, what would your picture of him be? What would your photograph of him be?
I think my biggest memory of Derek was this chain-smoking guy that would come in and smoke his Camel cigarettes. No, they weren't Camels, they were Sweet Aftons. And chain smoke those and fill in another story and away you go. But he was just a character. He really was. There was nobody else like Derek, really. You know, and big influence, but people person, real people person.
And what do you think is the kind of the benefit of, you know, getting all of these photographs out now and sharing them with people? And
I think it's interesting. I mean, I kind of sort of want to say I grew up with these pictures. They were all, there was always a big stack of exhibition prints in the cupboard. And, you know, on odd occasions you'd thumb through and go, "Oh yeah, wow, what a great picture." And there's some stunning pictures in there. I'd never seen, really. That was the sad thing. You know, they might have made the paper on that particular day, or various people might have seen that exhibition, but there are so many of them, and they are really stunning pictures going back across the time. And I think it's lovely to see them all come together, somebody to go through them. It was interesting just thumbing through them earlier and looking through those pictures again and remembering them, you know. I mean, just some incredible stuff. And really powerful pictures, you know, I mean, there's one that sticks in my mind with I think it was the coronation, and there's just the picture of the bottom section of a policeman's legs from his knees down, and this little lad sort of there, and you just look at him and think, you have no immediate idea that he's a policeman there, but it's just this really powerful image. And some of the miners at Aberfan on the disaster there, or even just the hop pickers, those characters I don't think are there anymore. They probably are, but perhaps I'm not seeing them because I've seen them, so many of them, you know, over the years. You just get used to them, and yeah, there's some cracking pictures there, absolutely cracking. It's great to see them come out and more people see them.